Hey, what's good, everybody? I'd like to welcome you all to another episode of the Boombox Guru. I'm your host, LB. So, on today's show, we're going to be doing another album review, and this time, we're going to be talking about one of my all time favorite metal albums, an album that I listen to pretty much all the time whenever I have the chance to, and that is Astro-Creep 2000 by White Zombie. And the full title is actually Astro-Creep 2000 Songs of Love, Destruction, and Other Synthetic Delusions of the Electric Head. Yeah, this is the album cover right here. Hope you guys can see that pretty good. I know there's a glare. Yeah, there we go. But yeah, man, this is the fourth and final studio album by White Zombie. But it was their second major label album. You know, their first being Le Sexorcisto, which came out back in 1992. But so let's get into this album. So a brief background about this album. It was released on April 11th, 1995 on Geffen Records. And like I just said, it was the fourth and final studio album by the band, and it was the only studio album with drummer John Tempesta. Although Tempesta would go on and follow Rob Zombie in his solo career. He played on Rob Zombie's first two solo albums, Hellbilly Deluxe and The Sinister Urge. And this album was also White Zombie's best-selling album. It peaked at number 6 on the Billboard 200, and it had three hit singles: "More Human Than Human," "Electric Head Part 2," "The Ecstasy," and "Supercharger Heaven." Now, "More Human Than Human" has gone on to be White Zombie's probably best known song, next to Thunder Kiss 65. Man, this is probably one of their signature songs right here. I know the first time I ever heard this song was on The Cable Guy back in the day. Of course, I didn't know who White Zombie was at that time, but I remember hearing that song in that movie and several other movies at that time. And Electric Head Part 2, you know, that's an awesome song. Very industrial, pounding track. Really great song. And Supercharger Heaven, I'll get into that later because that's actually one of my key songs. And with this record, Astro-Creep 2000, compared to the previous album, Astro-Creep was a lot heavier with its sound. They used a lot of downtuned guitars and bass, which gives the album a darker sound. And the lyrical things were a lot more disturbing, man. A lot of it comes off as like some sort of twisted, demented poetry in a lot of ways. And Astro-Creep also, the band started shifting more towards industrial metal with some groove metal. So you could say industrial slash groove metal. And compared to the previous record, Le Sexorcisto, because that album was such a great blend of like psychedelic, stoner rock, and groove metal. But this record was more industrial groove metal, a lot more emphasis on electronic aspects of the record, and a very danceable record too, which in a lot of ways Le Sexorcisto was too, because Le Sexorcisto had that influence of 60s dance music. But this one has like that industrial dance vibe to it as well. All right, so let's get into some key songs on this album that I like. And this was a little bit hard because I enjoyed this whole album, but I narrowed it down to four key songs that are like my go-tos when I put on this record. So the first song on here is Real Solution. I mean, the first key song is Real Solution number 9. Now, this song right here is easily my favorite on the album. It's easily my favorite on the album, man. It's got these deep, groovy guitar riffs and this wicked bass rhythm. Got this excellent pounding drum work throughout the song. And lyrically, the song seems to be about the Manson family murders. And throughout the song, there's these samples from interview excerpts from the Manson family women. Probably the most prominent sample is where one of the women is telling a story where she stabbed one of the victims, where she was like repeatedly stabbing the woman. And I believe the woman, according to her, the woman's response was, "I'm already dead. Why are you still stabbing me? I'm already dead." But it has really cool electronic keyboard soundscapes throughout the song, which I think are provided by Charlie Clouser, who has worked with a lot of industrial bands such as Nine Inch Nails, Rammstein, and a few others. But I really enjoy that song, man. It's one of my favorites on the record. I listen to it all the time. Even if I'm not listening to the album as a whole, some days I'll just, when I'm jamming on my iPod, I'll just go to that song just to rock out, man. And so okay, my next song on here is Creature of the Wheel. Creature of the Real, man. Now this is arguably the heaviest song on the album. It's got this like really slow, heavy, deep groove with some really heavy pummeling guitar riffs, and Rob Zombie, his vocal approach on this record, on this particular song, is a lot more aggressive. It's like a really good balance between clean and guttural. It's like borderline guttural vocals in some aspects, man. And lyrically, the song is based on I Am Legend / the Omega Man, and not the Will Smith movie. Not the Will Smith movie I Am Legend. Although that movie is based on the same book I Am Legend, as well as the Omega Man, which was another movie made back in the 1970s that was based on the same I Am Legend story. But that's what the song is really based around. And but at this time, the song was based on the book and the movie of the Omega Man. But just a very heavy and aggressive groove metal track, man. Another one of my favorites on this record. And then we get to my next key song, which is Supercharger Heaven. And this was actually the album's third single. And this is a fan favorite amongst most White Zombie fans, man. The fastest song on the album. It's got a really speedy tempo with some killer guitar riffs, and it's got that catchy hook where Rob Zombie is like devil man calling. that's like a chant for like a lot of people when they listen to this song. And another aggressive vocal performance from Rob, sort of like a nasally type style during the verses, but once it gets to the chorus, it gets a lot fuller, borderline guttural as well. And then there's Blood, Milk, and Sky, which is the last song on the album. And this song is like the longest and slowest song on the record. I forget how long it is, man. I think it's like 11 minutes or maybe. But it's weird because the song fades out and then it kind of fades back in. But when it fades back in, it doesn't really do anything different. It's pretty much just the same song continuing on. But a very slow tempo with like these really cool psychedelic guitar riffs, and the background has this ambient / atmospheric sounds, somewhat ethereal. Really, it's kind of like a calming sort of vibe that the song gives off. And Rob's vocal performance on here, it's like more monotone and laid back. And lyrically, it comes off as like spoken word poetry or some type of twisted weird poetry. And there's a whole debate on what this song's subject matter is about. Not too many people really know what it's about. Possibly some people say it's a critique on America, because some people have come to this theory that Blood, Milk, and Sky is representing the colors of the flag, the American flag. And then there's a lot of people that say that this song really doesn't have any meaning, because Rob Zombie, he's known to like just make songs, write lyrics that really don't have meaning to him. He just writes them. He said that on a number of occasions, that a lot of his stuff is tongue in cheek and they're just surface level lyrics. There's really not a deep meaning behind them, man. But man, one of my all-time favorite heavy metal albums right here, man. I listen to this album on a regular basis. It's just a real good record. And I talk about this album a lot. I post on Instagram about this album a lot too. But it's just one of my favorite metal albums of all time. So in conclusion, man, I would say that, Astro-Creep is one of my favorite metal albums of all time. And, this has definitely become a defining classic within the industrial metal genre. And, although the album doesn't really present an interesting / unique sound as like the previous record, Le Sexorcisto, it still does an excellent job at catering to the then popular trends of modern metal in the mid-90s. And what I mean by that is, even though Astro-Creep 2000 is my favorite White Zombie album, I've always said that Le Sexorcisto was the better record, because that record had such a unique sound that I have never heard any other bands manage to replicate. Like the sound that they presented on Let's Exorcisto was just so unique to them, because I've never heard any bands who have come close to really, copying that style of what they did with that particular album. But the thing about Astro-Creep is that it's essentially an industrial metal album. That's what it is. And in 1995, industrial metal was at its peak. That was at its peak. Marilyn Manson was out at this point. Nine Inch Nails was still on top of their game, killing it. There was just so many different industrial metal bands that were coming out, and a lot of other bands who weren't particularly associated with that style, they were changing their style and adding those elements into their sound. So, industrial had become very trendy at that point. So, the band didn't really do anything that I felt was really unique or separated them so much from the bunch. To me, they just took a popular style of music at that time, and they just did a great job at executing it, man. But this album, it would also be the stepping stone in Rob Zombie's successful solo career. As his first two solo albums, Hellbilly Deluxe and The Sinister Urge, they would continue and further develop the electronic industrial sounds of the record. I mean, those records took the electronic and industrial aspects to a whole nother level compared to Astro-Creep 2000, because he just took it to the next level. And something interesting about this album that I found out, last year was the 25th anniversary for Astro-Creep. So I think it was Metal Injection or Metal Sucks. It was one of those two channels. They did a things you probably didn't know about Astro-Creep 2000. And Jay Younger, he was the lead guitarist in White Zombie. He joined the band around 89 when they did the God of Thunder EP. But he said that he had to be at the studio every day to make sure that the band was on the album, because he said that Rob actually was trying to pretty much take the band off the record and just have pretty much an electronic industrial record. So he had to make sure that he was there at the studio, and so that the band would still be on there. And I also learned from this particular video that there was a lot of creative differences that were going on around this time. Of course, most people know by now that at this point, White Zombie was at the brink of breaking up. They wanted to break up after Los Exorcisto, because when Los Exorcisto initially was released, it wasn't very successful. It wasn't until, I believe, the video for Thunder Kiss 65 aired on Beavis and Butthead, and that's when that record took off. But they was actually wanting to call it quits not long after they finished that record. And plus, Rob and Sean, they were a couple for most of White Zombie's tenure, and they broke up around that time, and he met Sherry and whatnot. But yeah, they were wanting to call it quits then. But once that video hit Beavis and Butthead and that record took off, they decided to stick it out a little longer. But by the time they did Astro-Creep, yeah, they were pretty much ready to just be done. At least Rob was. From what I've learned, the other members of the band, they wanted to keep on going. It was more so Rob. But yeah, they had creative differences during this period, because Sean, her and Jay, I don't know about John Tempesta, but I know Sean and Jay, they wanted to create more of a heavy metal record that was more akin to what they did on Los Exorcisto. They wanted to make a hard rock heavy metal album in that aspect, and Rob was the one who wanted to go into the more electronic, electro-industrial sounds. So there were a lot of creative differences right there. So the parts where it kind of harkens back to Los Exorcisto, such as Creatures of the Will. Creature of the Will is a song that I wouldn't say it could have actually had fitted on Los Exorcisto, but it has some of that heavy groove metal laden style that was on that album, but just in a more heavier and darker style. So I think that that song is a great example of that kind of bridge or that mesh of where Rob was wanting to go and where Sean and Jay was wanting the sound to be. So in a nutshell, I think that song is the greatest example. But yeah, they were having a lot of creative differences at this point, and of course, you know, after this record, you know, the band they released a remix album called Super Sexy Swinging Sounds, which I also have in my CD collection, and I listened to that quite a bit too. I think that's one of the best remix albums I ever heard. And I'm someone that's not really a big fan of remix albums, but I really enjoy that particular one. But you know, they did a few songs for like soundtracks. I know they did a song called "The One" for, I think, the Escape from L.A. Soundtrack, and pretty much after that, you know, Rob pretty much just ended the band and he moved on to his solo career. But you know, those are just some little interesting facts that I wanted to bring up relating to this album. But it's one, like I said, man, it's one of my favorite metal albums of all time, man. I think it was a record that really helped to shape modern metal. I think there's a lot of people that were influenced by this record, even though it wasn't something that was really that stood out amongst other records. Because I mean, you know, like I said, Marilyn Manson was out at this point. He was doing something. He was doing a similar style. You know, Antichrist Superstar came out maybe a year or a few months after this. You know, then you had Fear Factory, who was really at the top of their game at that point. You know, industrial metal was the flavor of the day at this point. But even if White Zombie really didn't do anything with that particular sound to set them apart, I think they did an excellent job at executing that sound. You know, that's why I say that Astro-Creep 2000 is one of the greatest industrial metal albums of all time, because the band did an awesome job. So that's why it's a little bit surprising to see that they were all having creative differences. But you know, it's usually, in most cases, not usually, but in some cases, rare cases, there are times where the band may not be on the best of terms, and they usually end up pushing out their best work. I mean, look at Fleetwood Mac. You know, Rumors. You know, or Rumors is That's Fleetwood Mac's best-selling album. And man, that band it was all kinds of drama going on in that band when they recorded that record, and they put out one of the greatest rock albums of all time. So, you know, that's what Astro-Creep is. It's one of those records where everybody wasn't on the same page, but they turned out a really solid, a really good record, man. And so anybody that hasn't ever sat back and listened to Astro-Creep 2000 by White Zombie, man, I highly recommend it. And the great thing about this is that this album, and even the previous record, Le Sexorcisto, they are very much accessible. You can find these albums for a very reasonable price, and you know, they're just not hard to find. You can find this one and the previous record, Le Sexorcisto, without any trouble. Very accessible, easily found, man. I mean, if you don't find them at a record store, because I know a lot of places aren't selling CDs that much, you can definitely find it online for a really great price. So definitely check that out. And I hope everybody enjoyed this album review. I had a lot of fun talking about this record because it's one of my favorite albums of all time. And I hope anybody that's never listened to Astro-Creep, who's never heard of White Zombie, will, you know, go and give it a chance. You know, go check it out. And I'm pretty sure you will like it. I'm pretty sure you enjoy it. It's great music. You know, I'm not going to steer you wrong. I mean, to each his own. Everybody has their own style, but I'm definitely not going to steer you wrong. But I hope everybody likes this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be notified when I drop new content. Check out my other videos on my channel. I got tier lists. I got albums ranked. I got discography breakdowns. A few early podcast episodes that I was experimenting with early on. Just check me out, man. And I hope everybody has a blessed day, a blessed weekend, and blessed rest of the week. And as always, love, peace, and music. Peace out.